Why do you think it is so much easier for me, certainly, and for other people that I speak to experience that sense of freedom and peace when you're out in nature, as opposed to home?
Yeah, wonderful question. Yeah, yeah. Well, what do you think?
Don't know. Other than I'm away from people.
So there's a reducing away from otherness. Yeah. Well, I think the fundamental thing, the obvious thing, is that when we are surrounded by nature or ensconced in nature in some way, I mean, we all know the experience of arrive. I don't know if any of us live by the sea, but you arrive at the sea and you just go, it's just delightful because nature is our essence, isn't it? In the world of forms, and the body mind is a form, of course, we are that. We are what we are surrounded by, whether it's a hilltop or a sky, a cloud that looks like a rabbit, whether it's the sound of trickling water. When we are in the realm of the senses, which is probably the most delightful way of being in the world, although, we're aware of that, not of the worldness. When we're around what we essentially are, that we recognize it. We recognize it as fundamental. This is why we have our feet on the ground and the ground of being. I don't know if anyone watched a short film that I posted called, it wasn't called Grounding, but it was about grounding, how little time we spend with our feet on the earth. Or we might have trainers on, we may even have slippers on. Oh, it's called Earthing. For the next week, I walked home through the park and took my shoes and socks off. Because when I watched the film, literally couldn't remember the last time my feet had been on soil, on grass. And it made me sad, because my feet I do walk around without shoes and socks and sometimes no clothes on at home, of course, as we do, because you can. But I just lamented the fact that I hadn't been grounded or earthed in that way for so long. I've just also bought my first pair of trainers for maybe 4 years, 5 years. But, to escape from all of that and finally put my feet on moist, even damp soil on a day when the sun was high, I just smiled. I just smiled really simply. So I think that sort of points to why it is that when we are around nature, we are in our essence, we are in something that is essential, that is recognition, that is knowing something, that is, the personality overlooks what it essentially is, doesn't it? This is the point of the mask that we wear, that we're always trying to work on the mask, as we were saying in the meditation. Everything we do is to make sure the mask looks right. And of course, the sensory experience of otherness, of other people, we're always like, we're in that one up, one down, and homeostasis, a zero in the middle. But our measuring yard for that isn't our own face, isn't us. It isn't our isness. It's thatness or otherness. So we're constantly measured by feeling like, if there's something that our perception and our conditioning says is objectionable, and that could be our conditioned responses to other people, where we think, I don't like this, I don't like that personality type or trait, or the way this particular person looks. We're all bound by that kind of measuring stick. Or on the other hand, we have perception says this person is beautiful, they fit the current sanctioned model of how beautiful people look. The international bright young things in the magazines, skinny is perfect, and anything less than skinny, then you're in a minority or something. When we all know that people like people to look like people, really. As Depeche Mode said in 1984, people are people. They're very astute with that. But because our experience of how well the mask is going is measured by what is essentially, we might call a negative view of people that are less than, and getting from people that we perceive to be more than still a negative view. Essentially, we're measuring the mass that we can't even see by two types of negative reactions, or potentially negative reactions. So this is why we have this, the ego thing makes some amount of sense, because the ego, the kind of king baby thing, it's either, it's I'm the king of the world because all these people are less than, or oh, I'm a helpless, vulnerable baby. Yeah, so you retract from the people, as you say, we remove ourselves from people, we take ourselves to sacred and simple places. And again, it is that, I think it's a mechanism of simplicity as well, isn't it? I think there's a walk just near me where I can move along the side of some allotments, but before getting there, I'm just surrounded by nettles and blackberry bushes in the backs of people's gardens. But at a certain point, I think the best I can get on that particular walk is there's one telegraph line, very thin telegraph line going across the horizon, but there's one captures the experience of seeing no human-made objects. So everything, is natural. And light pollution is a thing as well, isn't it? So you can take yourself to somewhere really remote, but still experience and know light pollution. So yes, of course, it's easier. This is why we go on holiday, isn't it? We take ourselves to places of unfamiliarity, so we're not constantly identified with the things that are familiar to us. As much as they give us comfort, they can become moribund and profane, and they don't enable us to escape. They feel like traps. It's not surprising that the idea of nature and, the inquiry of why does it make so much sense, because I think that's really what we're asking, has arisen, because, we moved through a period of listening and being that was pointing us to what we might loosely call our true nature. And, in the entire discussion about, the natural world itself, it's reminded me that this is kind of the whole point of what we do here, isn't it? That those experiences that we collect, those times and those periods, and the necessity of walking to distinct places or surrounding ourselves with the right things, helpful though they are, if we were to call them retreats, if we take a bit of time out each day and retreat, or we go to lovely places, familiar places, or places of reduced activity, then we're retreating from that, or we literally go on retreats as previous spiritual seekers or current spiritual seekers. But what we do here with every word we apply is point us into ourselves, to that same experience that we're trying to capture by surrounding ourselves with the right objects or reducing ourselves away from the right objects, so that we can better realize and better embody the fact that true nature, that which the word awareness points to, the luminous sense of witnessing light, or the formlessness in which all of those words sit conceptually, is never absent. We are retreat. Retreat is happening, and it's not happening to anyone, but, even in a day where we've been in the personhood and been in the sense separate self, at the turning of a screw, at the flick of a light switch, we can always be reminded by all of the activity of thinking, feeling, sensing and perceiving that our true nature is never absent. Our true nature of being, the nature of being, is present to all activity and knows nothing about the activity. It knows only itself. Nature knows only nature. That's the final answer to the inquiry, isn't it? Why does it make so much sense to be in nature? And there is that sense of being part of something bigger, but also the recognition when we're in a place of, unremitting natural beauty, or simply the ocean, or present to an experience, we become what we essentially are. You put yourself in a valley in Wales or Scotland, or in the countryside somewhere in a remote place, and there aren't separate objects. It brings you to a place of non-separation. You are surrounded by the essence of your nature. You're surrounded by what you fundamentally are. And the recognition for it becomes the dominant experience. As much as, it just pulls us nowhere. It pulls us out of the dream whilst in the midst of the dream. And so, of course, there's no distraction there. They're so overwhelmed are the senses that they dissolve, don't they? The senses collapse into themselves. And as that collapse happens, what rises out of that is non-separation, the undivided field of beingness to what is, as it is. Yeah. And of course, people are like objective fidgets, aren't they? To be around other people is like this constant movement and activity, and the sense of separation when we're around other people, especially when we're not in satsang or we're not in like-mindedness, it's like, all right, well, the mask comes down and there's we go into performance mode and the evaluation of the performance, and that it's much less readily available to just be not who we are, but what we are. Who we are is constantly moving, is in the dream, isn't it? But it's just majestic, really. We're reminded of the majesty of what we fundamentally are. We come to the end of thought inquiry and expression and activity and clamours and meaning and measurability, and we come out of that and into, by the same movement, our essential nature. I mean, the clue's in the title, isn't it? It's essential, as in the essence of what we are, and it's natural. There's no personality. When you're in the sea floating, one of my favourite experiences, which I've had the privilege of doing a number of times, is sunset in the sea in India somewhere. I always go down at 5 o'clock for sunset, because it's just being in this exotic location and in this place steeped in pseudo-mysticism, but also healthy mysticism as well, To be in the ocean, I don't need to be Billy. I become the wave, don't I? I remember being in the sea once in Goa, and the waves kept coming, and I just had this thought that it's just, every thought was just another wave. So as the waves kept coming over me, I used that as a mantra and was saying to the sea itself, it's just a wave. It's just a wave. Yeah. And we know, don't we, from this approach, that wonderful saying about we can no more be separated from the love that we are, or from the love of God, to use religious language, than a wave can be separate from the sea. But taking ourselves to be a separate individual, we take ourselves to be a wave and perceive the destination of the beach and try to perfect the ways in which we're going to get to the beach, because when we get to the beach, the experience, the event that we've finally been looking for will enable us to realise our potential. We'll finally get there this time, and here's how. And in so doing, we imagine ourselves to be somehow separate or related to an experience and a pathway and a program and a procession towards an event that is only imagined, and we overlook the body of what we are. Yeah.
Fabulous.